got to say, when I came in, I said there's only one Sir Lanny that I've ever known. And when did she move to Albuquerque? Whatever happened to Eduardo Silva? I got to catch up is what I got to do. And we want to thank you because you are truly gifts to both of us, both of you, to all of us. Thank you. It's just great. And I remember when you came here. Yeah, you remember when I came here. We were new together. Remember that? And I just think it's great. The other great thing is Ed Benedict. Where is Ed Benedict? Ed Benedict, where is he? Thank you for doing the chart. And I want you all to help me by saying, with your applause, we can make that $39,000, and we will. We will. Yes, we will. Yes, we will. I'm so thrilled because when I came in, I said, "Now we were at 58,000 last week. Do you think we could at least get to 60?" Well, and then some. So I think it's just great. It won't happen without you. And it will happen because of you. And I thank you so much. You know this. What's the motto of the Boy Scouts? Anybody? Be prepared. Sure, be prepared. Now, my question this morning to all of us is, are we? Now, you're smart people. You know there's several ways one can prepare. And why would people even think about being prepared? Well, we're living in trying times. It's profound, and it resonates all through society. It's better to be prepared than not to be prepared, wouldn't you say? It's possible for us to face the future. That's the whole thing about being prepared. It's a dilemma. Yes, that's true. But we feel comfortable when we say those two words, be prepared. I know it's hard for you to imagine, but I was a Boy Scout. And I didn't get lost in the woods, and I got a lot of merit badges. I didn't go as far as this man here behind me, who was an Eagle Scout. How about that? I didn't get there. But it's good to be prepared. And I guess that's the question for all of us. What way can we prepare ourselves for an unknown future? We have no idea what to prepare for. Well, Israel was not prepared for what happened with the slaughter by Hamas. It's always a quagmire of circumstances. We don't know if we'll be able to come up with an answer that we can live with, but we try. I like the idea of being prepared. And when it comes to your faith, you're on your own. You're on your path, I'm on my path. We may not be on the right path, but we, for various reasons, we still have people who are with arrogance and superiority as they dare not miss the opportunity to pounce. Now, I wasn't always a United Methodist. That was when I was about 20. Before that, I was a Roman Catholic, a semi-attending Roman Catholic. And I even dabbled in the Episcopal Church, which, as you know, is really the Anglican Church, which is the Church of England. And from my earliest days, though, thanks to my mother, I felt a very spiritual power and a social and intellectual importance drummed into me. And I suppose when I was in college, I marveled at how did all these churches function. And I became known to all the various groups in the United Methodist Church. I was involved in the Methodist Youth Fellowship called MYF. That was my first job in the Methodist Church, to be a youth advisor in my home church in Suffern, New York. There was the Wesley Foundation, where I had a lot of extracurricular activity. Well, I don't know exactly when I decided to become a minister, but there I was at Drew University, receiving, or at least studying for my master's and other degree, But eventually I learned some of the ins and outs about how churches function. And one big thing that I discovered, and you probably already knew this, did you know that there's politics in every church? Did you know that? Yes, you knew that. And in fact, politics pervades every aspect of our lives. So today, I'd like to speak to you on the relationship of religious faith to our political order. For two reasons. First, the revelation that politics is everywhere has a definite effect on me and my public service. And second, because of the hot-button issue people raise about where does politics belong in the church. And James Shaw helped me with that. On the latter point, I know some of our contemporary American folks, I feel proud to belong to the church that held high something called our social principles. Well, that's the reason I went into that church, because I liked what they were doing. And they helped a lot of people in great need. And these are the people we reached out to. However, in the 80s, you remember, we observed something called the religious right. That was spearheaded by the Reverend Jerry Falwell of his moral majority, who's coming out of Lynchburg, Virginia, with his Liberty Baptist University. And he would broadcast his church service and say, with that great face of his, look at how many people are here today, and boast about things that, well, that was before Joel Osteen and Franklin Graham and all those good folks. With presidential blessings and praise, the good Reverend Jerry Falwell targeted various candidates to become defeated. He had something called a morality scorecard. Remember that? They developed this thing, and people followed it. And I remember in those days, I was really surprised. The Roman Catholic Church and their bishops were publicly calling to task politicians who might be on the fence in a questionable way about abortion. Well, then there was the Libertarian Party. Lyndon LaRoche, he'd run constantly for president. And there's only one problem with Lyndon LaRoche. He was blatant in his anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish rhetoric. Now, I would say back then, and I say it today, that the Christian right is so wrong. Remember, the Reverend the Reverend Pat Robertson, he started the 700 Club, and he brought in a married couple, and they seemed to have promise in whatever he believed in. And so their names were Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. Remember that? They started what you could consider a spin-off of the 700 Club. Kind of like television shows that do so well, they give some of the characters their own show. Well, they had their own, and wouldn't you know, these fine, upstanding servants of God built poor people out of millions with their overbooked hotel and the PTL amusement park. Well, we all remember that. Gradually, the political focus shifted, and we began to see another potent force of the Christian right by our own elected representatives on all levels. I thought it was strange to see Roman Catholics marching. Cardinals and bishops and monsignors were all in the front of the line, lobbying for Catholic agendas. And I became more and more involved with the Methodist Church, ordained within that denomination, and I helped in a small way to formulate a pastoral letter on the immorality of nuclear war. I don't mind saying my role was very insignificant. I was a runner for the voting bishops. Whenever they wanted something, I was one of the ones, running to help them to get whatever they needed. I guess to help them to vote or something. And that was at the General Conference of the United Methodist Church. And they put out a statement opposing nuclear weapons as weapons of destruction. And then they were declared weapons of immorality. Even that received dissenting criticism from people within the Methodist Church. And over the years, the National Council of Churches, of which the United Methodist Church still belongs, became a voice of opposition from administrative policies, ranging from engagement in Central America to cuts in various social programs to positions on civil rights and liberties. Elie Wiesel, the great Holocaust survivor who wrote all those books on Holocaust theology, said there's no way a human being can be illegal simply because they're a human being. Rather, they are what he called undocumented immigrants. And all through history, the United Methodists, as well as the Presbyterians and other mainline denominations, have been known to rally other churches and protest as a mobilization for peace and justice in Central America and South Africa. That's how I got to South Africa. Beyond all those indications of religion and politics are the potent combination at home. There's ample evidence that they're also a volatile mix abroad. Remember the unrelenting hostilities between Protestants and Catholics in Ireland. Remember when the church led the resistance to the apartheid regime in South Africa led by Bishop Desmond Tutu. And even the Berlin Wall came down. Communist countries fell like dominoes in Eastern Europe. And then came the debates over liberation theology. And these stuffy mainline churches and Catholic churches and non-denominational churches, they claim to have a mission to the poor, sort of. And all over the world, to this very day, there is strife among religious people. As we saw a few days ago with Hamas and Israel itself. Imagine the horror of bombing civilian homes of Israeli citizens. Thousands of people brutally died. And it's even worse, and I won't even talk about that. So given the profound complexity of the relationship between religion and politics, I'd never presume to address such heavy matters as a scholar or an expert or even as a theologian. But I would like to observe something. The role of faith in public life. These observations I base on my own personal experience. They brought me to the mission field of the General Board of Global Ministries of the United Methodist Church. In my own religious roots, to state the obvious, religion did play a role in my life, and accordingly, all those years involved in bulletin preparations and sermons and visits and rubber chicken dinners and rummage sales and so many meetings, they were protest rallies for people who were being unjustly treated by people in power. Powerful people keeping powerless people under their thumb. And if we didn't protest on their behalf, then who? And if such demonstrations are not continuing now, then when? To be fair, I don't wish for you to have a wrong impression of my experience. The United Methodist Church, as a denomination, did do some good things until they became infected with the right-wing ideology, hatred, racism, and homophobia. Yes, a principal influence on me was Reinhold Niebuhr. And in his classes, he translated insights of his faith into fundamentals of political democracy. Two liberal theologians stand out for me, Walter Rauschenbusch and Horace Bussell. They had a big impact on my thinking as well. To divorce politics from religion is to give up the independent critique of the established order. Then you're not a church. You're something else. I asked somebody really recently, is there any politician you know of that you can believe in on any level? No, there's not. And I bet you, if I asked all of you that, you'd say, no, I don't know of any that I could believe in. Why? Some people need to be ministered to, making decisions on our behalf. They affect our lives. And our religious faith from time to time judges every dimension of human experience. Socially, economically, politically, and, of course, personally. Now, I want to be prepared. Like you, I was not prepared for what happened last week. You know, I find it fascinating that one question preoccupies me, even today. Back in the day, when I was young, and what would you call me? Green behind the ears, you know, I was a new minister. And newly ordained, which doesn't really mean a lot. And a lot of those questions you might have today. What is the link between the religious law of love and the practice of politics in any democracy? That's the question. And if the question remains the same today as it was way back when, and I think it does, the answer might be that the correlation between the rule of law and the practice of politics is the concept of justice. The idea of justice varies in human history, but I suggest that at the very least, justice means assuring every person has her due, his due, what he or she is entitled as a human being. Now, justice is not the same as love. Don't misunderstand what I'm trying to say. Love does not count or reckon, as we've been reminded over the centuries. But justice does. Justice means to be calculating. It's not love, therefore, but justice. That must be the immediate objective of political action. Is love then just irrelevant as a political action? No. No, on the contrary, it is our love for human beings, all human beings, commanded by our faith generation after generation, a genuine concern for justice among all people that allows love to be shared freely as a powerful rationale. Politically, racism is more alive today in many ways than it was decades ago. It certainly hurts more today than it did then. It was just obvious then. Now it's subversive. Today there are politicians who I've heard who openly campaign because they oppose evil, liberal, woke minds who want to mongrelize the white race. I've heard them. Now, I guess from all of you listening, you probably have picked up evidentially that I never really did understand the doctrine of separation of church and state. I certainly didn't understand it to mean that it had no role in politics. The question raised recently, years ago, too, it's not about whether, but how religion and politics ought to mix, that people feel comfortable with. The times, they are a-changing, as Bob Dylan's great prophecy of his lyrics tell us. But in many ways, they're very similar today as they were many decades ago. Remember when John F. Kennedy ran for president? He was strongly encouraged not to assert his religious convictions and to deny that he spoke for his church and that his church did not speak for him. Mitt Romney had the same thing. Now, if I say yes to the question, does religious faith have a place in politics, in public life? That answer, yes, would also insist that there be limitations in the relationship. So what are some of the guidelines to help us to distinguish the mixture of religion and politics? The first guideline concerns a level of which religious convictions are most properly implied in public debate. I think our faith can and should be a source of guidance of basic values. Yes, we must be wary of those times when it comes to public policy, that a principle of religious beliefs present only one solution. That's not true. In my view, strident insistence by anyone that says that there can only be one solution comes dangerously close to the instrument of government being used to impose doctrinal specific views on others who do not share those views. Now, let me make it clear. I'm not saying religious leaders or others should not speak out. Oh, absolutely, you should speak out. But I'm asserting that when they do these things, they leave behind the authority of their faith and become earthly political actors. Whatever they propose must in turn be evaluated through compromised political processes. And there's another point to make. We dare not be highly selective in the areas that we find as a link between religious and public morality. As Elie Wiesel said also, how could one say that there's a relationship when it comes to matters of school, prayer, and abortion, but not when it comes to matters of poverty, civil rights, and the prevention of nuclear war? In this respect, I remember well the right to life advocates who rolled through Congress never saying a word in support of legislation to help educate poor children or the disabled. I found the silence of these constituents and concerned citizens on these issues to be extremely distressing. Now, my second guideline for relating religion and politics follows from what is more of a tone and scope of substance, is that when we appeal to religious convictions in political life, we should do so in the spirit of tolerance and not self-righteousness. Moorhead Kennedy wrote, "An arrogance and an intolerance of smug self-righteousness that sometimes surfaces in religious circles, whether they be members of a moral majority, or whether they be fundamentalist, or whether they be Muslim, or from different countries, or whether they be clergy involved in the peace movement, is still dangerous." Well, twice a week, I drive on a road that is local, and I can't imagine anybody would call that a highway, but they do. It's called Route 60. Yeah, you know of it? And I'm driving behind a big 18-wheeler, wondering, what am I doing? Well, there's a billboard sponsored by a right-wing organization called Students for a Better Government, asking the question of candidates in one county. Here's what they ask. Can you honestly say that you have a relationship with Jesus Christ? How well do you know him? Well, I'm driving along, and that passes me by, catch you on the return, and there's some political leaders on all levels of government who believe they are actually sent by God as leaders under God's authority to save our society. If he's good enough for Jesus, he's good enough for me. You can't make this stuff up. Rallies, more rallies. There are many rallies all over the place. And I remember Pat Robertson showed up to a few of them in Jackson, Mississippi, right near Philadelphia, Mississippi. Philadelphia has its own history. There are people who say they represent mega churches and that they themselves are speaking for God and saying that God told them, him or her, to tell you that God has sent this candidate for you to vote for because we want to reverse the direction of our country. Well, instead of such arrogance, I would urge on the part of faithfully religious people in the political process a degree of self-restraint, not to say maybe a little humility. Religious leaders in particular should remind their followers that other solutions from ones they propose are possible and appropriate and should be scrupulous in the respect of rights of others to disagree with them in the public arena. The fact is that when we enter the political fray, each of us brings a particular heritage to bear, and each of us is therefore obliged to intently and respectfully adhere to the arguments of those with differing views. Each of us should be open to persuasion if the reason of others speaks more effectively for the public good. I don't think that's asking too much. And I hope we never forget the message that Abraham Lincoln delivered to a war-torn nation in the second inaugural address on March 4th, 1865. Both parties in the Civil War read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each invoked his aid against the other. So surely it is a fundamental Judeo-Christian heritage thing that all people in all nations are with the right to develop whatever faith they choose. The price of arrogance, of pride, of self-righteousness in the expression of religious convictions in political life is steep. Indeed, every day we hear the echoes of idolatry, of religious chauvinism, and political triumphalism that claims that America is a Christian nation. Not so. America is a nation of Catholics, of Jews, of Protestants, of Eastern Orthodox, of Muslims, of Buddhists, of agnostics, and non-believers. We must always acknowledge and embrace and celebrate the religious and secular heterogeneity. Welcoming this diversity keeps our society healthy and free. Two guidelines that I would hope for between religion and the public order. A third guideline is the objective of that relationship, which in my view should find common ground for a working consensus on matters of public morality. One of the greatest speakers I ever heard was Governor Mario Cuomo, remember him, of New York? And he made it clear in his speech during the time he was governor. He gave a speech at the University of Notre Dame, I remember it. And concerns rooted in religious teachings, he said, influence both law and the policies of the government effectively and legitimately when they've gathered support. Also, changing the law and policy contribute to altering those standards. Ideally, however, the morality encoded in our laws represent a shared understanding of the common good that all morality plays. It's not to be the reflection of any one person, but a collection of a variety of traditions, secular and religious, of all of our nation. That's where Unitarian Universalists stand high over other traditions, in my opinion. So let me simply say, if we're serious about being prepared, well, we must marshal our convictions toward achieving consensus, when we also must live peacefully with people whom we consider by our particular standards of right and wrong to be, dare I say it, sinners. Maybe some guidelines I might suggest in the sermon are modest to help us think how we might engage with our religious faith on behalf of political purposes. Just look at our 7 principles. Start there. And that's a great place to begin. And the years just keep rolling on. With all of that social justice witness, even looking ahead, we can be sure of tense strains in our already strained relationships between our various faiths, not to mention our collective public honor. I, for one, remain confident in the resilience of our institutions in the United States of America. And I believe and devote my life to the Constitution of the United States of America. This is respect for one another's belief and strengthens our commitment to religious freedom overall. Thank you.